So as we continue our discussions on all new, all different Marvel, what I want to do here is pick up with a Spider-Gwen and X-23 team up. Now, to provide a little bit of context here, for those of you all who are new to Marvel Comics, Spider-Gwen was really an accidental success. To be honest, Spider-Gwen was designed to be a limited series, and it told us, or it showed us, an alternate reality where Gwen Stacy was bitten by a radioactive spider instead of Peter Parker. The problem with this, or I guess not really a problem, but a byproduct of this was that not only was the suit of Spider-Gwen so attractive to readers, but the idea of Gwen Stacy having spider powers was attractive as well. And so literally Marvel caught lightning in a bottle, and Spider-Gwen just took off in popularity. It was insane. When she first appeared, you'd go to conventions and you would see Spider-Gwen outfits everywhere, which is understandable because the Spider-Gwen costume is amazing. But with this annual, this serves one of two purposes that annuals usually serve. And what I mean here is that annuals are designed for one of two things. The first is to either jumpstart a new story, introduce new characters, or something like that. We saw Chris Claremont do that when he first introduced Rogue. I think it was Avengers Annual number 10, or maybe it was X-Men Annual number 10. It was one of those two, but he introduced Rogue for the very first time and used that as a way to basically segue her character into the Marvel Universe. The second is to simply just fill things. For example, right now we are in between the events of X-23 with regards to Civil War II and the start of a new story arc called Enemy of the State. The problem with this is that there's a little bit of leeway there. Enemy of the State is designed to be part of Marvel Now, but by the time that this annual had come out, Marvel Now hadn't really started yet. And so Marvel was forced with two choices. Either they would have to just not have any X-23 titles for, 2 or 3 months, or they could give us annuals that are designed to literally just tell us a story and fill some holes. And that's what annuals usually do. They just kind of fill holes or they introduce new characters. And so this team up is actually really cool. It's actually really interesting the way it's done, but it also harkens back to a lot of the older stuff in Marvel Comics with regards to the original Wolverine, James Howlett. Now what happens here is we initially pick up with X-23 simply not being herself. It's really kind of strange here. And of course, she leaps out a window and lands on a car. Now, again, keep in mind that Gabby is still with X-23 at this point. Of course, she's taken Gabby under her wing for the purpose of training Gabby on how to be a superhero, teaching her how to learn how to use her abilities, how to be effective. But X-23 does not know the fact that Gabby is a very dark person, that Gabby is not a very good person. She doesn't know all of that stuff. So for her, Gabby is just a young girl that she's taken under her charge who was designed to be a clone of X-23. And so when, of course, Gabby gets downstairs and she begins to analyze X-23, see what's going on, Laura just pops up and starts talking about how her bones are mending and so on and so forth. But all of this seems very new to her. And what she says is that she's not Laura Kinney, that her name is Gwen Stacy. And so what we do is we jump to the reality of Spider-Gwen and we pick up with her and the Mary Janes. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, the Mary Janes is a band that Gwen Stacy is part of. And that's one of the reasons why fans liked her character so much, because it was so different. It was a wholly new, different creation that was wild, that had huge changes from the main Marvel timeline. She was her own character, she had her own group, she had her own friends. It was a huge change up. For example, Reed Richards is a young kid instead of being an older, experienced man. And so these things are made for a really cool situation when it came to her character. But the fact remains here that, as we would expect, Gwen Stacy, if her mind is in the body of Laura Kinney, then it would make sense that the mind of Laura Kinney is in the body of Gwen Stacy. And that's exactly what happened here. For some reason or another, their minds have swapped. Now, Gwen Stacy, or I guess Laura Kinney in the body of Gwen Stacy didn't initially know this. Laura didn't realize what it was that was going on. All she knew was that she was meeting a guy named George Stacy. She didn't really know who he was, didn't really understand what was going on here. She was suddenly in a reality she didn't recognize. She was part of a band that she didn't recognize, and so she was largely beginning to panic. But what happens is the Gwen Stacy, or I guess the Gwenverse version of Reed Richards appears and says, hey, we need to go have a conversation. We need to, I need to inform you of a few things that are going on. Now, Reed Richards of the Gwen Stacy universe was not the one behind this, but he's still extremely intelligent. And so because of this, he was able to easily deduce what it was that was going on. And because of this, we basically pick up with him telling Laura Kinney in the body of Gwen Stacy, look, you've only got about 3 hours before this is irreparable. Before this 3 hours expires, you need to go to the dimension where your mind was swapped. You need to find the person that took your mind, and you need to figure out what's going on. Now, because of the fact that Reed is pretty intelligent in terms of what he's capable of, he points her in a pretty solid direction. And so we basically just end up picking up with Gwen Stacy in the body of X-23, who's talking to Gabby. But almost immediately after the two of them begin talking with one another, we're suddenly met with the X-23 counterpart to Spider-Ham. And this is really cool because Spider-Ham was basically Spider-Pig. It was a pig with the powers of Spider-Man, and he has a following that is wild about him. Like, there are people who love Spider-Ham. I could never really get into him too much, but I recognize that there are people who do dig him. Now, the kicker here is that this Wolverhampton, as he's called, is not actually here. Instead, he is a construct of the mind of, Gwen Stacy in the body of X-23. And this really seems to be something that she just made for the purpose of understanding her situation. It's just a subconscious way to keep her from losing her mind. But in the midst of her talking to Wolverhampton, she officially meets Gwen Stacy, or I guess the Spider-Gwen character, for the very first time. Now, this is pretty big because these two have never met. But it makes sense that they would somewhere along the line because they're two of the most popular female characters in the realm of comic books. And so because of this, it makes sense that, the two of them would come together along the line somewhere and they would have a team up. And I'm really hoping this leads into something a little bit better because in truth, when it came to the character of Spider-Gwen, while she was a huge part of Spider-Verse, while there was a lot of struggle between her and the main universe Peter Parker because he recognized she was Gwen Stacy and he didn't want to see her die, even if she was from a different universe. For the most part, following the events of Secret Wars, Spider-Gwen she seems very isolated, with regards to what it is that she does, how she has things going on. She's just kind of out there in left field. And so to see her cross over more and more with other characters from the main Marvel universe is also something that's really intriguing. One of the downsides to this, though, is that a lot of fans want to see more expansion on her universe. They want to see more expansion on the kind of characters that we see in her universe, the differences between those characters and the ones that we're used to. And this is really just rooted in the fact that comic book fans like to see alternate realities of versions, regarding characters that they know. They like to see different takes on different characters. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but it's just interesting to read about. That's one of the reasons why alternate reality stories are so popular, because we've seen stories where Sentry kills the Marvel Universe, for example, but we see stories where, Miles Morales becomes Spider-Man after the death of Peter Parker. We see all these different, scenarios, and people really seem to enjoy it. But the fact remains here that with Spider-Gwen and X-23, they come to the realization that in order to get their bodies back, they basically have to trace the source of this change and figure out what in the heck is going on. And so what they do is they basically come to the realization that someone in a room across from them shot some kind of array that caused their minds to switch. And so when they trace it to its source, of course, they find out that this person's gone. But because of the fact that X-23 has such incredible sense of smell, because she has that same ability as Wolverine, she's easily able to pick up the scent of the person who was in the room and trace that back to a location that takes them underground. And when they get there, they end up in this room, this sealed facility, and they begin investigating around, but they also run into a few booby traps. Now, when the person who set these booby traps up makes their appearance, they bear a striking similarity to Wasp, or even to a character called Hornet that was way back in the day, a guy by the name of Eddie McDonough, I believe. And we actually learned that the relationship between this person and Eddie McDonough is that they were family. Now, of course, X-23 and Gwen Stacy, Spider-Gwen, don't know this, but what's also really interesting is they're learning about the powers that the other has, which is really cool. For example, Laura Kinney, being in the body of Gwen Stacy, has never had an instance where she's ever used webbing before, and she doesn't realize the tensile strength of webbing. And so when she shoots it, she doesn't know how to pull it back. She doesn't know how to let that webbing go and then shoot more. And it's really just fun, to see that situation. It's fun to see a character that suddenly takes on the powers of a member of the Spider family, but doesn't know how to use them. Not only that, because Gwen Stacy is in the body of X-23, she's also experiencing her claws for the first time. And so while she begins to threaten, while she begins to basically make the case she's going to take out Hornet, she has her hands to her face, she pops her claws, and she stabs herself in the head. And so this is just funny. To me, it's interesting to see these things unfold. And so in light of seeing, of course, X-23 seemingly kill herself, Hornet just kind of begins sick and reveals her identity. And what we're told here is that with the character Hornet, her story harkens back to the death of Eddie McDonough. Now, the death of Eddie McDonough tied into the original Enemy of the State event, which makes sense because the upcoming story arc for X-23 is called Enemy of the State. Now, it looks like they're completely different events. It looks more like it ties into the aftermath of X-23 turning against Captain America, not really fighting on the side of S.H.I.E.L.D., but more or less going rogue away from the influence of Old Man Logan, S.H.I.E.L.D., so on and so forth. But in the original event, Enemy of the State from 2005, what had happened was the original Wolverine, James Hallett, had been kidnapped by Hydra in the Hand, and he had been brainwashed and turned into an assassin designed for the purpose of tracking down and killing all of the superheroes, basically anyone who opposed the desire of the Hand and Hydra to take over the world. Now, while he was eventually taken and he was cured of his brainwashing, the story that I uploaded called Wolverine Kills the Marvel Universe is a what-if story on what would have happened if he wasn't fixed, if they never took him captive, and if they never reversed the brainwashing. He eventually just went on and killed every single superhero and supervillain in the Marvel Universe. Captain America, Elektra, Daredevil, you know, the whole 9 yards, the Incredible Hulk, he killed them all. And so again, basically what Hornet tells us here is that because she was wildly intelligent as a child, because her brother Eddie realized how intelligent she was, he made the case or made the decision to begin tutoring her in developing that intelligence. The issue was that following the death of Eddie, for some reason or another, Hornet was basically placed inside of stasis and she remained completely isolated from the world. But then what she tells us is that this happened after the death of her brother Eddie, and her goal was to basically operate away from Wolverine's ability to locate her and to try to figure out a way to destroy him. The issue was that because James Hallett was, for all intents and purposes, immortal, and because it hadn't quite occurred to Hornet to simply encase him in adamantium, the idea was to develop a weapon that would force him to swap bodies with somebody else. And so when she finally emerged from her stasis, from her hibernation, and she discovered, Wolverine was alive and active, she didn't realize it was X-23. And so when she shot X-23 with this device, the result was that it forced her to swap minds with Gwen Stacy, putting us in this current situation. And so what happens is that after all this is explained, of course, Hornet realizes the mistake that she'd made. She realizes that, Wolverine, James Hallett, is no longer part of the equation because he's dead, he's encased in adamantium and gone. And so what she does is basically just swap their bodies back. It's a simple conclusion, no muss, no fuss, and it works out pretty well. But what this seems to do is basically set the stage for allowing, Marvel to move Hornet into the future of, most likely being a partner or a sidekick or maybe an on-again, off-again character in the X-23 line of stories. But it also sets the stage for future crossovers between Spider-Gwen and X-23. Now, whether we'll actually see that happen, that's a question I don't have the answer to. But I would imagine that a team up between the two would be pretty well received. I mean, I thought it was a really cool story. The fact that it's lighthearted, I think, works out. I really wouldn't want to see like a dark story with a crossover between X-23 and Spider-Gwen, but I think the lighthearted nature of Spider-Gwen stories complemented with the relatively lighthearted nature of X-23 stories really works out well for the two of them when it comes to crossing over and meeting one another. But again, because of the fact that their bodies are switched back to normal, the story just basically comes to an end. Of course, Jonathan the Wolverine seems to be very happy with the situation. Gabby's also happy with the situation. I definitely want to see some more stuff with Jonathan the Wolverine. He's pretty awesome. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button. And if you guys enjoy this video, drop a like. Let me know what you all think. And leave a comment down below. Let me know, would you guys be interested in seeing more crossovers between X-23 and Spider-Gwen? Because I certainly hope Marvel would get wind of it and definitely give us more crossovers in the future. But with that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end. Now we'll catch you all later. Peace.
Mm-hmm.